Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining our ThreatConnect platform walkthrough today. I'm Megan Warner, Product Marketing Director here at ThreatConnect, and I'll be your host today. We have Ian Davison, who's one of our security engineers, and he'll be showing you the platform today. I'm going to go over a few things about the platform first, and then we'll start the demo. ThreatConnect arms organizations with a powerful defense against cyber threats and the confidence to make strategic business decisions. Built on the industry's only extensible security platform, ThreatConnect provides a suite of products designed to meet the threat intelligence aggregation, analysis, automation, and orchestration needs of security teams at any maturity level. During the walkthrough, Ian will show you how ThreatConnect can give your team one place to work together so everyone benefits from their collective knowledge and talents, as well as helping you find threats, evaluate risk, and mitigate harm to your organization, and also allows you to apply everything you know about threats to all of your security technology investments to make them work better, smarter, and faster. Please feel free to ask questions at any time during the demo. You can type your questions in the chat function on the Go to Meeting panel. We'll answer your questions at the end of the demo during our Q&A session. Ian, I'm going to go ahead and pass it to you now to take over.
Cool. Thank you so much. Thank you for the introduction. So what we have going on today is I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. So bear with me for just a moment. Go ahead and say Google Chrome. Excellent. Does my screen look okay? Can you see everything? Excellent. Another reason I ask is because the screen resolution is much, much bigger. Everything about ThreatConnect is not just, some people say, well, you know, is it a feed or anything weird like that? And it's really not. The whole point of ThreatConnect is it's a threat intelligence orchestration platform. So when you start looking at it from the bigger picture, it's like, well, great, I need some way to store my threat intelligence. Just like I have a SIEM to store all my security logs, I really need a platform to store and be the system record for all my threat intelligence. Well, granted, you want to bring some of that intelligence into the back-end tools like a SIEM or any other defensive firewalls or do anything else of that nature. You also want to go ahead and just keep this one central repository for everything that is threat intelligence centric, if that makes sense. So you would go ahead and say, well, great, while I can take what I have, and I'll give a quick demonstration of how we marry things in later in the demonstration, but to push it all together, we go ahead and start looking at that bigger picture, saying, well, as we move through everything, you can go ahead and start looking at that big window and start saying, well, I'm getting intelligence feeds from multiple different places, for instance, and you know, whether that be from ThreatConnect intelligence or technical blogs and reports, all the way down to DHS, commercial feeds, you name it, you can bring it in, Stix Taxi, do everything as possible and start bringing it in and making sense out of that. But from here, you can also be members of communities and the like as well that are also relevant to your industry vertical. We just had a call with a telco, for instance, who was like, great, show me this, show me that. And, you know, we can go through these industry verticals that help that type of industry as well, and everything from financials to everything that isn't. So it's extremely flexible, and it's what you make it. So as you pull all that information in, a lot of people are still of the you know, understanding of, well, why is this important to me, and how do I make it so it's easy for me to get to? After I start pulling a lot of information into a platform, the whole key of it is to start thinking about how do you want to manage the flow of that data, but also how do you want to go ahead and take advantage of what that looks like to you, and being able to find things. So this is why I also have this dashboard up called Priority Intelligence Requirements Dashboard. It allows you to go ahead and make your own, because this is all customizable dashboards. You can go ahead and start making your own priorities, and this is part of the flexibility. We're not here to show you how you must be this way, or you must have a maturity model of A, B, C, or D. It's not that at all. The whole point of it is to show, great, what's your process, what's your maturity model, and how can we help you get one step ahead of the game and fit your methodologies and models. And we will go ahead and go through some of that stuff, but the long and short of it is that as you walk through some of these things, for instance, you want to say, well, great, show me these cards, show me what's so important about them. If you look at this card, for instance, look at it from an analyst perspective. You know, management said that I need to go ahead and look for all ransomware. So what we do with ransomware specifically, in this case, is that I've done a query against my entire database in the back. I've looked at all of my sources, all of my communities, and I've said, show me every group, which is basically by group, show me my threat intel by source. So I want to see the owner name, which is basically whether that be one of these intelligence sources, the owner, and show me everything it contains for word ransom for ransomware. And after I go ahead and do that, I can go ahead and select my graph type. I can start putting colors into it and everything else so I don't have a boring dashboard. And I can go ahead and generate this. I then go ahead and do a similar thing for show me the exact recent intel on the problem as well. So I have the source. Now I have my recent. So show me everything I have. Why it's what is this? This is sorted by date, so I can start going into this if I want to. These are all drillable. And I can go ahead and see it in multiple languages. If they're in native language, I can go ahead and obviously decrypt at the same time. So I can start looking at this and start seeing the bigger picture on it and start seeing why it's important to the vertical that I'm looking for ransomware. And then the other side of that, if I want to go back the other side, I can, and start looking at my related ransomware. So things that are related to it still are obviously things like Lazarus Group, North Korea. Everything in DDoS attacks can also be related to ransomware. And you can start looking at from these, this is for the source, recent and related. So you can get your things that are immediately related to it and things that are in the outlier section of where you could potentially see things that are potentially connected to a ransomware or an attack thereof, simply by going ahead and getting that. So at no time do you have to worry about looking at irrelevant data, as this would also be one of the many ways you can go ahead and get your information based on the things that are important to you. So the other side of that too is you can start customizing these types of dashboards, and I don't mean to spend too much time on these, but you can start looking at why these sorts of things are important to you. Top observations, things that are in your environment, how they're also pertaining back into your SIEM environment, and observations over the past 7 days, where those things are getting C2 beacon out, that sort of stuff. Getting an understanding of what that is, so you can look at the kill chain, you can look at all those different facets as it also factors into your environment. So to look at the bigger picture, also to look at some of the intelligence, we can start going into the browsing environment. So we start browsing, and as you start browsing for a lot of information, you can start thinking about, well, that atomic level indicator doesn't really mean much to me, and for the most part, it doesn't really necessarily have to. If you're looking for something that's more specific to adversaries or something else of that nature, you can have to absolutely look at those adversaries and how they pertain back into other environments and how they go ahead and react. So you can start looking at it from that group perspective and start seeing groups of groups. So you can start seeing, well, is this adversary related to an incident or a campaign or anything else of that nature? So you can go ahead and see, oh, this is an incident from this one adversary is linked back to an incident. And that indicator, that incident is related to, obviously, back to the adversary, but also to the campaign they have that they started. And this is the infrastructure that they use, along with file hashes that are associated to them, email addresses, and IPs and URLs and everything else in between, to go ahead and get greater intelligence as to what things to start looking out for in other places. So the next kinds of questions that a lot of people start to think about is, well, what about other ways of getting information into my environment as well? So we can do this a few ways. There are multiple ways we can start looking at either manually importing. So you can do a manual import of your email. So you can just simply go ahead and upload a file if you need to be. You can also hand jam in the headers and the like. Or you can go ahead and do the other side of that, which is uploading unstructured data. When you start doing an unstructured data import, I can simply go into here, for instance, go ahead and open up an FBI report. This is just a simple info card. Notice it says TLP Amber on it. I can go ahead and refang the entire document. A lot of Intel has defanged information, so we want to go ahead and make it useful. The way the platform is structured, you can start. I like to show this simply because we go ahead and have other things pushed in, and you can go ahead and start saying, well, I really don't want things like FBI in here. So we go ahead and say it's excluded, but we still show that it's been excluded. Whereas other things that are URL specific, if you want to include them, you could. So just by selecting all and unselect, you'll go ahead and get that information. From here, it'll tell you if there's any new indicators or if there's anything existing. If there is existing, you go ahead and view what they are, and then you go ahead and just click next. Now, this is also where I said that this is pretty much your system of record for everything that you have brought in. So we can also start doing the DNS, but we'll get back to that too. You can go ahead and relabel the same way, TLP Amber. If you want to put tags on it saying where it came from for the source, if that's something that you really need to do, you can, but you can also go ahead and create the document inside the platform as well. So if you're looking at that platform or looking at that document, you can go ahead and see that it's got a name. And from here, you can go ahead and just paste in the file name, PDF. And if you have an incident already that you wish to associate it to, you can, but you don't have to. So if you say, great, I want to make it a part of this adversary over here, you just go ahead and click save, and it'll now associate it to that adversary as well. And from here, I go ahead and do that. It saves the document, and it saves everything about this document at the same time. And as soon as it's done saving, I apologize if it takes time. Here we go. I can now go into the system, go into here just by clicking on document as it's a group item. I can find my document and go into PDFs, and here it is. That's the document name I just imported. I'm going to go ahead and open that up. I have everything I need about it. If I want to go ahead and go back and view the file, maybe there's something in there I missed, I can go into say and click view, for instance, and it'll open up. Ta-da! And as it opens, you can scroll through it and see, make sure that if there's anything there, just to give it another quick once over if you need to be, and say that this is important, this is not important, or anything else of that nature, and start bringing in additional information. Or you can go ahead and re-download it, and if you have another version, you can go ahead and click update file, and it'll pretty much do the other side, which is a repository, so you can do version control in a rudimentary way. But from here, you can also go ahead and start looking at from associations. What else has this also been tied to? So if I go ahead and make this full screen, and I can go ahead and change this just by clicking on the settings, I can go ahead and say, well, this is greater with layer 1 of seeing a threat. But what happens if I go ahead and see what else has been associated to? By clicking apply, it'll now go ahead and associate it to multiple things inside of my environment. I can just scroll into them one step further, and I can start seeing other incidents that it's also been anchored to, for instance, and I can start seeing other anchor points as they're related to each other and how they're actually communicating and what links them together. So you can start seeing a bigger picture of what it is that things are also connected to visually. And the other side of that is I can also see a potential table graph of all the associations of everything. It's also if there's any victimizations or any other form of associated incidents at the same time. So as soon as I start digging into this, for instance, it'll start giving me other information, and I can start looking at this has also been seen by multiple sources. And as deduplication happens, while we don't have 10 records of the same IP or the IP listed 10 different times, we just go ahead and aggregate and deduplicate at the same time. So you don't have to necessarily go through all of these so much as you just look through one thing. And you'll see right here, we start looking at the geographical information. We can start seeing it came from the FBI. You can start seeing the IPS intrusion attempts, State Board of Elections, all these sorts of things that are related to this one specific individual atomic layer indicator, as it also pertains back to a greater group at the same time and threats. And those sorts of things that are also associated with it, as this is a very active IP and it's also been used a lot in the Netherlands. So that's how we go ahead and start doing ingestion from a manual perspective, and also start using the platform as that workbench scenario as well. And then from here, we can go ahead and start looking at other investigative links that we can totally change. And although this is just a setting inside of the platform to say, add this extra one. So if I want to add paste bin to this, I absolutely could. And then from there, I can go ahead and add other things. If I want to go ahead and say that if my collective analytics layer, for instance, is updating this, I can go ahead and say, well, I don't want it to change. If it changes, for whatever purpose, I want to keep this on top if it's something I'm actively looking at. I can go ahead and say, unlock that into place, keep it active, regardless of whatever my collective analytics layer is doing, because this is based on the fact that how long's it been out, has it really been changed, and it'll keep updating and deprecating at the same time. But regardless of whatever Cal does, I can always choose to follow it. And with that, I can go ahead and say, this is a high priority, this is a medium or a low. What's the definition of high, medium, and low? Inside the system, we have a thing called Alert Center. So as you look into alerts, you can go ahead and start defining this, and you can start adding your own to it, whether that be group level, or you can just start adding in new notifications for these things. But with this, you can go ahead and say push an immediate action to you, and that's a high, and email immediately, or you can do the end of day email summary to you if it's a low. And you can start doing those sorts of things and getting alerts based on the outputs and the outcomes. So as activity happens, if it changes for whatever reason, you can start seeing how people have been in the system and start changing stuff, and how the associations have been pushed in. But at the same time, as you go ahead and see that, I want to get notified. So I'd go ahead and get a notification up here to say that something's happened to this indicator. And then from there, I get a full list, and I can just mark them off or say that I'm all red. So I can go ahead and do that, and they're all taken care of for the day. They're not necessarily now net new. But as I go through them, I can start reviewing those one by one and start looking at the bigger picture that way as well. So it all depends on how you want to go ahead and start looking at these things, and start getting other information on what it is that the system's doing. If you have any tasks associated to this at the same time, you can also go ahead and start looking at that as well, and start saying, well, great, this is a task I have associated to it. I also have this in a dashboard, and say, look at my dashboard, look at my tasks. As this would also come in, I can start seeing how my tasks are being looked at, all my recent reports, and I can start saying, great, here's my tasks, here are all the open tasks for the group, for the organization. Here's all my tasks per user in my group, and here's all the open tasks or tasks as they stand, whether they started, completed, or in progress. And if I'm managing tasks or anything else of this nature that I want to go ahead and start reprioritizing based on the type of task that is, or related to a task like phishing or something else of that nature, I can go ahead and start doing that and saying, look, this is a high priority based on what it is. I can drill down to it straight away and start getting greater information on it, and start saying, this is something we really need to go ahead and do. And I can escalate this, it's escalating automatically to one individual. But I can start getting in touch with these guys or reassigning that task to go ahead and make it a little bit different. And then from there, we can also go ahead and start taking action. If you want to start looking at things of how we go ahead and do an action, for instance, you can start thinking about the orchestration side of it, as we stated earlier in the start of this webinar. And as you start putting those things together, it starts bleeding into the capability of what if. What if we could do the following things? Everybody seems to have a process, a way, and a methodology on how to start something and finish something. When I say that something equals a process, that process is from, great, it has to come in an email, or maybe it doesn't even have to come in an email. Maybe it's a user action. When I say user action, I want to be able to look at this, and I want to be able to take action on this from within the platform. So if I go into that environment and start thinking about how that needs to be, or how I want it to look, or something else of that nature, I can go into here, for instance, find something that is relevant to me. I can start looking at, great, this is an indicator, this is something I want to look at, this has been related to APT 28, and a bunch of other things, various reports as they come in. I have file hashes, I've done a lot of work on this is great. I can see it hasn't been seen in any of my endpoint stuff right now, which is nice. And the other side of that too is not only has it not been seen in that endpoint, but I also want to see if it's been seen inside of my QRadar, or more to the point, I would like to make it to go over to my SIEM or my QRadar, or if I have it inside of Splunk or ArcSight, or even Logarithm for that matter, or any of the other SIEMs that you want to go ahead and plug into. So I just simply go here, click play, and it'll go ahead and send it across to my QRadar, and it'll say success, add it, and it's done. So what we've done here is a user action to automatically deploy. I'll take you into the playbook itself, and I'll deactivate real quick. And what this does, just to walk through what it is that's happening, is that it goes ahead and it'll show the start essentially called a trigger. You got to use a trigger to start a playbook. What makes an automated action start? So when you go into this, you go ahead and define in this type of trigger what you would like this trigger to be available to do. So I've trimmed this one down, and it's not a limitation of QRadar so much as it is just what I wanted to add to my QRadar. I've also gone ahead and changed this for various other customers to add in email addresses and file hashes and a few other things that are relevant to their QRadar. And if I go ahead and click next, I go ahead and tell it that it's also been added based on success, that a message that I get out of here after this has been completed, and it comes back and does a loop around. So here I go ahead and set a reference set to get into the system. So I go ahead and create a reference set. After I make sure that reference set's been created, it'll go into here, for instance. It'll go ahead and say deploy, except this reference set I want to call TCP, and it'll go into my QRadar, and I'll go ahead and provide an authorization token. Same thing for host, same thing for URL. I go ahead and I want to go ahead and deploy it, not to the same reference set. In my case, I want to go ahead and make a separate reference set. This way, if I have, however you define your reference sets, most people wish to, in the state of QRadar that is, have different lists for different things so they can go ahead and make different rules as they apply. So instead of having one reference set with multiple rules of an if then else, you can just go ahead and have one reference set with a specific rule or a rule that's relevant to what's contained in that reference set. And I think I've talked about that a little too much, but effectively what you've done after this, it goes through the host. If it is an address, plug in the address. If it's not, then go ahead and see if it's a host. If it's a host, then go to the host. And it's just a cascading logic. And then from there, if it's none of those things, then the only other thing that's available in this case is a URL, but you can go ahead and keep on going. And then it'll add an attribute back in to say that it was done, and it'll set that back around. So now if I go back to my indicator, there should be an attribute in here to say that it was sent to, let me refresh my screen real quick, that it was sent to QRadar. At least it should have been. I have to look into that. So anyway, the whole point of it is that you go ahead and get it done, and it will go ahead and tell you more about the information. You can link it back in, and the automation's there. It is in QRadar, and I can go ahead and validate that it's there. It's not a problem. So the other side of that too is you also have things like Splunk. How does Splunk work? Well, Splunk's actually pretty quick and straightforward. So if I go into, say, Splunk over here and bring that up, I can go ahead and start showing how the Splunk integration also works on the other side. And as soon as my browser refreshes, maybe. Copy URL. I can go into the ThreatConnect dashboard. And within ThreatConnect, we go ahead and have this dashboard. You don't have to use the dashboard to take advantage of the threat intelligence. This is just a means of ways if you don't have enterprise security by Splunk. This is just another way to give you additional information and additional advantages and ways to get around data. To configure the application, start bringing your threat intelligence in, you simply go ahead and install this app, and then you go into configure. Configure is simply done by API. After we go ahead and do the API call, we start looking at the indicated downloads. Indicated downloads, as we saw over here in posts, you can go ahead and start looking at everything you have inside of intelligence sources, as well as your communities and your own organization equals a source. And you can start turning these sources on and start turning them off as they are also relevant to you and relevant to your needs. And many of these indicators types will go ahead and give you exactly what you need. After you go ahead and do that, you want to keep it relevant. This is what makes this so simple. You go ahead and marry in your data models and the like to match in. So it'll go ahead and match the threat intelligence to the data models, the content of those data models, and start making that relevant to you. So at no time will you be bringing just irrelevant junk inside to your scene. And the same thing, if you don't have a data model set up, but you have custom searches that you like to go ahead and have it match against, by all means, run a custom search and have it match against that search instead. And for the DMZs and those sorts of things and web traffic, this is also a good way to take care of some of that stuff if it falls outside of a data model. From there, we go into our event triage. Once you start marrying that threat intelligence in and pulling it all together, you can go ahead and start seeing what comes on the other side, seeing what matches you are getting. So we're getting one here, for instance, that is PCAP specific or IOC. So this is related to a CVE. So we can go ahead and start looking at this. Came in from our source. You can see it's related to a SANS blog. Here's your information. Here's the indicator of interest. If you want, we can link back, see it for a secondary close-up, and see exactly what's been looked at, see how many times it's been seen in the wild and observed at the same time. In the wild, it's been observed 2,000 times, something you probably might want to take a look at. And then from here, we can start looking at it at the same time. Now, the other side, we can start changing how we want to go ahead and with our logs at the same time, because this one is, we didn't change the data model, but you can start tweaking and turning a little bit further on this as well. And then if you want to see more of this stuff, instead of having to cut and paste this whole search in, just go ahead and scroll down to the bottom here and say open in search. And from here, you just go ahead and straight pivot directly in. And now you can see all of these events as they relate back in. Now, if you do have the other side of it, which is say enterprise security, you can go ahead into say ES, and you can also start looking at your incident reviews, but you can also go ahead and look at threat intelligence and threat activity, because we also take advantage of threat artifacts. So that becomes into here, and you can start doing the data models as they pertain into you as well, and start looking at this, and it's already in that mode of saying, great, now show me that traffic one more time. Click on it, and it'll automatically take you to the next one round, which is that search, and it'll go ahead and throw the search activity as it's more relevant to the situation. So that's how we take what you don't know, aka threat intelligence, into things that you do know, which is your security logs and everything else. And then the other side that we want to bring you back attention to is also how we go ahead and work within your community's environments. As we work into the collaboration side and start working with your threat intel communities and the like, we also like to take the other side of it and start saying, well, great, if I want to share information out to the outside world or something else of that nature, or I'm a member of a community, and that community has said, oh yeah, great, here's all this information, or this is something that should relevant and should go back out of the community because people need to know about some problem. We don't share anything by default, so it's entirely up to you to say this is something I want to share. To do that sharing, if you're a member of one of these communities or any community that you're a member of, you go into your browse group, say you have an adversary that you want to go ahead and share out. And this is pretty easy to go ahead and do. So we found this one adversary, for instance. You've got some information on it. It's a little bit obscure. You don't really have enough there, but you want to throw it back out to the organization, see if there's anything useful. I'm going to go ahead and see if I have one in my organization that I own. So let me click none and none. And, well, better yet, here it is. So this is the one I want to go ahead and do anyway. So I've got a decent amount of info, but these are the things that should really be shared out. And I've also got some other things in here that have been, high. These things are, do not share, brief management, that sort of stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and add an attribute that says course of action or course of action taken. And we're going to go ahead and do a TLP red because I really don't want to have this shared out with anybody. Brief to management. Click save. Yay, everything's good. But I now want to go ahead and start sharing because it's what we want to do. So I'm going to share this out. I can share this out to an individual, or I can share it out to multiple. I'm just going to go ahead and go to individual at the moment. I want to create a new group inside of that because I haven't seen it inside of my community yet. This is net new, and I'll go ahead and put it into my community over there, and I want to push everything across. Why not? They can have it all. I wanted to see everything about it as it really pertains to it, but I also want to go ahead and exclude anything labeled TOP red, and I'm going to go ahead and do that. So you'll see that they get everything here about the campaigns, the Lazarus group, this incident that also happened, the adversary, the spear phishing attack, those sorts of things. And then I click save. And it will go ahead and publish that out to that demo source. In this case is my demo source or community. So it'll go ahead and push that out, and I can go ahead and share it that way. The other option is after that, after I go ahead and do that, is that I can also have a user, or if I have other members of the community that aren't on ThreatConnect platform, I can have them go ahead and receive via Stix taxi. So I can go ahead and set up a taxi user inside of my platform to also share that information out. And I can go ahead and say that I only want to go ahead and share anything inside of a community that I create. And it can only be of a strict TLP label, or anything that goes into that community, go ahead and share it back out to other members of that community. So we can do it that way as well. And from here, we can go back out to sharing. And here we can go ahead and start pivoting into the associated group of here and start looking into other facets of the adversary and anything else that I want to start pivoting back on that is also related, in this case, to North Korea, DPRK, and those sorts of things, and start getting greater information on how their infrastructure has been coming back in. And as you start looking through your intelligence and start making this as more of your workbench and how you want to start looking at the bigger picture, you can also start looking at how you going through and, best way to put it, you're curating your own intelligence, but you're also curating the intelligence that's relevant to you as well as reconciling that against your own environment and seeing if there's anything coming up. So you can start doing alerts, you can start doing the follow this environment and start looking at types of alerts that you want to go ahead and get more information on. You can start doing a lot of automations for enrichment and sending those across to various platforms or tools like AMAs, sandboxes, that sort of thing, to go ahead and get data detonated, bring those reports back in, and many things in between. And then you can also go ahead and do the other side of it, which is add a spaces and those sorts of things. So spaces apps are a little bit different. You can go ahead and do what they call batch imports. You can do some static analysis. You can go ahead and open a file. For instance, you can do API testing. So if I have a file I want to bring in, I can read in a file, I can start doing the decoding on it and those sorts of things. And this really does become that workbench. But at the same time, if I also want to export this out to a data lake to do other things, I can go ahead and start looking here, for instance, and I can plug in other information that I also potentially want to bring out of the platform. So in this case, I want to go ahead and bring out the addresses as it relates back into what I'm doing. So I'm just going to go ahead and find a query that I want to go ahead and do, which is this guy. Say if there's a specific URL that you want to go ahead and do, or anything on, say, bad.com, paste. I can go ahead and say search, or get in this case, and it will return exactly what I've gone ahead and plugged into it. So I get a status of success, and I go ahead and see exactly who owns this. So I want to see if the indicator URL is even in the platform as well. So you can start doing from that way, and then you can start pulling that information out. You can also start pulling the indicator itself out as well, and getting greater information on potentially bad.com as just an example. And from there, you can go ahead and start taking a look at other things you'd want to use the REST API for. So if you want, you can also add groups this way, you can add indicators this way, you can start harvesting intelligence out of the threat intelligence platform into your data lake if you wanted to do say a threat forecast model of your choice or something else of that nature, you can start manipulating the data out of the system and those sorts of things to go ahead and make it work for you at the same time. Megan, did I miss any parts so far? Hello, Meg, you there? Guess not. And that's pretty much about it.
I'm here, Ian. Sorry about that. Struggling with the unmute button. Nope, everything's good so far.
Not a problem.
Technology is a fabulous thing.
It has its moments, doesn't it? So as we roll through the system, you can start thinking about things that are relevant to you when it comes to, these are the visualizations that I need to see. These are the reports that I need to get visualization on. So if I want an adversary report, for instance, on that one adversary in North Korea, I can go ahead and just simply download that PDF and I can pull it up when it's available and start getting the entire update on everything about them, their infrastructure, the IPs, the activity, anything and everything else that they've been working on. I can forward that straight over to management instead of having to recreate everything that I've also been seeing. So that's pretty much about everything in the platform, so to speak. But as it relates to everybody else's individual use case and those sorts of things, everyone seems to have something a little bit different. If anybody does have a separate use case, feel free to ask some questions or anything else like that. But Megan, I think that's pretty much everything. We've gone through ingestion, we've gone through automation, we've gone through reporting, we've gone through dashboard customizations, alert center, Spaces apps, creating, importing. I'm just trying to think if I missed anything, but I think that's pretty much about it, Megan.
Okay, great. We do have a couple questions. If anybody has any additional questions, feel free to type them into the questions pane on the GoToWebinar control panel. The questions we do have so far are, can ThreatConnect also function as a ticketing tool? Can a alert trigger ticket creation?
Yes and yeah, to a point. So it's not full case management. And when I say it's not full case management, you can go ahead and assign tasks. So if you have a ticket and you look at tasks, so if I go into browse my tasks, for instance, I can go into here and say additional enrichment, that's fine, and click on this. I do go ahead and get a task number. So if you were to go ahead and refer to that as kind of a somewhat of a tickets, but at the same time, that is something we can go ahead and do for you. Then that is covered built into the system and who it's been assigned to. The other side of that, if you do have a ticketing system like a Remedy or a ServiceNow or something else of that nature, we do have full integrations with those systems, so we can tie into those types of systems to go ahead and produce other formats. So if I go into my ThreatConnect and look at my ServiceNow, we can go into this, for instance, and do this as a user action to go back and say, send this over to ServiceNow. And all I gotta go into the ServiceNow side is we can also go ahead and say that these are the people we want to assign it to. And if you want, you can assign it to a group. And then, for instance, you take in the description, the short description, so you can go ahead and view it quickly inside of ServiceNow. And then we go ahead and assign and get the filter, the system ID, the incident number, and then we assign it back as an attribute and add that at the same time so we can create more information on it if need be. But the other side of that is we go ahead and add back an attribute. So once you go back in, it will create, not only say, oh yeah, we've gone ahead and made this a ServiceNow ticket, but we'll have the incident number and the system ID pushed in as an attribute into that indicator and the like. Does that answer the question?
Yep, I think that's great. Another one just came in. Is there a good method to integrate CVEs from scan results into ThreatConnect and correlate them with external CVE tags or indicators?
Funny you should ask. So we went ahead and created CVEs for you guys. So you can go ahead and plug in the CVE information, and you can also do browse by CVEs. So if I go ahead and look at some of the CVEs, not only do we have, I didn't have any pushed in right now, but I also have a methodology here to go ahead and view by CVE. So if we look at, where did app go? There it is. The vulnerability dashboard. We can also go ahead and do a creation. Just log out of here real quick and I'll log back in as me. So we can go ahead and start looking at the dashboards to look at indicators tied by CVE by source. We also have integrations with Qualys and Tenable, and that'll go ahead and enrich those CVEs based off of the reports from those platforms. And that way you can go ahead and get ingestion. If you get an enrichment, it's kind of a positive negative type scenario. So it becomes a double negative in that case. So if you go getting enrichment, you probably want to chase that down because we're only enriching intelligence that you're exposed to. So when I say that, if you're getting an enrichment based on an externally exposed IP or host or anything else that you have your platform getting scanned by, and it says, oh yeah, we have an enrichment on that, we have a CVE associated to that, we can go ahead and do the dashboard that says we have so many hosts, with these associated CVEs, and you can take a look at those CVEs by tags and those sorts of things. And we've built dashboards for customers for this specifically to go ahead and give people the relationship of those CVEs as it pertains back into their environment, so they can go ahead and see, this is what my exposure is, this is what we have, and now we can go ahead and take remediation steps based on what exactly it is. So did that answer the question well?
Yeah, I think so. The person who asked that, if you want further explanation, just type in the chat box. And then we have one more, which is more about delivery methods. So they're wondering if this is a cloud offering or just on-prem.
It's actually really cool. The fact that we can do both. So if you want cloud, we can give you cloud. If you want on-prem, we can give you on-prem. And everything you get in platform on-prem, you get in platform in the cloud, and vice versa. Not one thing is, only in cloud or only on-prem. You get everything that you have in one platform deployment to the other deployment. They're both identical. It just comes down to, what does your policy want and what do you want as someone who runs it. If you want to run your own environment, by all means, we can go ahead and do on-prem. If you want to go ahead and do it as a cloud offering, but you want to go ahead and do orchestrations, we can do it with what they call the basically all cloud. And if you want the orchestrations inside, you can go ahead and do a secure gateway through what they call a multi-environment orchestration server. So to give you a quick understanding of what that looks like, you can do it with here environments. And here's one right now that you can go into solutions and pull that up. And it will basically give you an understanding of what orchestrations have been running inside your environment and how many times a day, what playbooks have been run, those sorts of things. And that way you can go ahead and see how everything looks, but you can also go ahead and reach back into your environment. It's also good if you have multiple data centers, and that way you can go ahead and orchestrate against those too.
Perfect. Thank you. Looks like that's all our questions. So thank you, everyone. Please be sure to join our community at threatconnect.com/free. That's where you can find access to our TC Open account. You can explore and poke around a little bit. You can also feel free to contact us at info@threatconnect.com, and we'll get you exactly what you need. Everybody have a good day. Thanks again, Ian.
Bye. Welcome.